The auction yard pulsed with heat, dust, and tension. A rust-colored haze clung to the late afternoon sun as it dropped behind the dry ridges of the Nevada hills, casting long shadows that danced across the trampled dirt. The rickety wooden pens groaned under the weight of nervous horses, some swaying, others pawing at the ground, their eyes darting to every sudden noise. But none drew the fearful attention like the black Mustang in the farthest pen, the one with eyes like obsidian and a soul that refused to break. He was a sight to behold, even caked in dried mud and anger. Scars traced his flank like lightning strikes across a stormy sky, remnants of ropes and whips that had failed to tame him. His mane fell in thick, unruly tangles, whipping around with every violent toss of his head. The locals had nicknamed him Demon, though no one dared call him that too close to his face. Even the seasoned ranchers kept their distance, preferring to whisper stories behind cupped hands. He threw Hank Garvey into a fence last month, broke 2 ribs and a collarbone, one man muttered to another. Should have put him down weeks ago, someone else said, though not without a trace of reluctant respect. He ain't meant for ropes or saddles. The auctioneer, red-faced and sweating beneath his wide-brimmed hat, wiped his brow and glanced nervously at the pen. Every time he tried to start the bidding, the horse reared or slammed against the gate with such force the hinges squealed. Nobody raised a paddle. Nobody dared. Then she stepped forward. The crowd didn't notice her at first. Just a wisp of a girl in dusty jeans and scuffed boots, no taller than the gate she approached. Her presence was like a breeze before a thunderstorm, quiet, almost unremarkable, until it changed everything. She walked with slow, steady steps, eyes fixed on the black Mustang like she saw something no one else could. At 17, Lily Ray had learned how to move through the world unnoticed. But now, every step she took rang louder than the auctioneer's calls. Conversations fell off into stunned silence. She stopped in front of the pen, hands at her sides. The Mustang halted too, snorting violently, hooves skidding in the dirt. His ears pinned back, chest heaving, teeth bared, but he didn't charge. He just stared. Lily stared back. Her face was sun-kissed and plain, with freckles dotting the bridge of her nose like constellations. Her braid had loosened during the long ride from home, and one strand clung stubbornly to her cheek. She didn't flinch when the Mustang pawed the ground or when he let out a guttural, furious whinny that sent other horses skittering. She whispered something, too soft for anyone to hear. But the Mustang's ears flicked forward. The auctioneer cleared his throat, confused. You looking to bid, miss?" "I am," she said simply. A ripple of laughter moved through the onlookers. A few shook their heads in disbelief. Others muttered prayers, either for her or the poor soul who'd have to clean up after her. The Mustang slammed into the gate again. "You must be joking," one rancher sneered. "That horse'll kill her." "I ain't joking," Lily said, reaching into the back pocket of her jeans and pulling out a worn envelope. "This is everything I've got." The auctioneer opened it and hesitated. It wasn't much, barely the minimum, but it was a bid and no one else had offered a dime. "Sold," he said with more disbelief than enthusiasm. "To the girl." Lily signed the bill of sale with steady hands while the Mustang rattled the stall behind her. The clamor resumed around her like a hive of angry bees, people predicting disaster, betting she wouldn't last a day, muttering about foolish children and wild things that don't belong in cages. She didn't argue. She didn't speak at all. Instead, she turned to the trailer she'd borrowed from her grandfather and backed it slowly toward the pen. The horse watched her every move. His chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths, muscles quivering, legs ready to bolt. She didn't approach with ropes or fear. Just time. Lily opened the trailer, left the ramp down, and waited. She sat on a bale of hay 10 feet away, legs crossed, eyes soft. She didn't demand or coax. She simply existed. The crowd trickled away in boredom, then frustration, and finally with that same blend of fear and pity that people reserve for those they think are beyond saving. Dusk melted into night. The yard lights hummed to life, casting a dull orange glow on the scene. Hours passed. And then it happened. The Mustang took a step. Just one. A tentative movement, like he hadn't quite meant to. His head dipped an inch. His hooves scraped against the dust, testing. Lily didn't move. Another step. Then another. By midnight, the ramp creaked as he placed his front hooves on it, eyes never leaving her face. She rose, slowly, and backed away into the trailer's shadows. He followed. When the doors latched shut behind him, her breath trembled, not from fear, but from awe. She pressed her forehead against the wood and whispered something. A thank you, maybe. Or a promise. The drive home was silent. The highway shimmered with ghost-like mirages under her headlights, and the desert rolled endlessly on either side. Midnight, the name she gave him, though he hadn't accepted it yet, kicked the trailer wall twice but soon settled. The rhythm of the road lulled even his fury into something quieter. By the time she pulled into the gravel path leading to her grandfather's ranch, the moon hung heavy and bright. The house stood in slumbering shadow, its paint peeling. The porch light flickering like it, too, had grown old and tired. She parked and got out, boots crunching the gravel. She didn't open the trailer yet. Instead, she walked past the sagging fence, past the empty barn stalls, to the small wooden chair near the porch. Her grandfather sat there, wrapped in a wool blanket, eyes squinting against the dark. He didn't speak at first. Just looked at her with a mix of worry and resignation. Tell me you didn't, he finally said. She nodded once. He sighed long and deep. Lily. I had to. That horse has a mean soul. Some things can't be fixed. Lily looked back toward the trailer. Midnight hadn't made a sound. I don't think he's broken. I think he's just never been heard. The old man shook his head. He ain't a puppy. He's wild. You'll get yourself hurt. Maybe, she said, walking past him toward the barn. But I've been hurting anyway. She opened the stall farthest from the others, filled it with fresh hay, and left the door wide open. Then she unlatched the trailer and waited. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, with a great heaving breath, Midnight stepped out. His hooves clinked on the gravel like thunder in miniature. His eyes were wide, but he wasn't panicking. He looked around the yard, at the sky, at the barn, and then at her. She turned and walked toward the open stall. And slowly, warily, he followed. When the door closed behind him, she whispered, "Welcome home." The night settled around the ranch like a heavy blanket. Stars blinked to life above. Inside the barn, the black Mustang stood like a shadow made flesh, unyielding and unreadable. But when Lily sat outside his stall, back against the wood, he didn't retreat to the far corner. He stayed close, watching. In the quiet hum of midnight, something had begun. Not a victory. Not a miracle. Just a first step. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. The first morning after bringing Midnight home arrived with a sharp chill and the scent of frost still clinging to the ground. Lily awoke before the sun, wrapped in the tangle of old quilts on the couch by the fireplace, where she'd fallen asleep after hours of listening for the slightest sound from the barn. The silence had been almost more unnerving than noise. She shrugged into her coat and laced her boots with slow, deliberate fingers. Every movement carried weight, she knew the risk. The Mustang hadn't accepted her. He had only tolerated her presence long enough to follow her into that trailer. And even that had felt like a fragile miracle strung together by patience and some invisible thread of shared pain. The barn loomed quiet in the blue-tinged light of dawn. Frost glittered on the hinges of the old wooden door as she pulled it open. Midnight stood exactly where she'd left him, his body tense, ears twitching toward her even before she stepped inside. The hay in his stall remained untouched. "You didn't eat," she murmured. The stall was clean. No signs of rolling or kicking. No disturbed straw. He had stood all night, watching, waiting, mistrusting. Lily moved slowly, always in his line of sight, never reaching directly toward him. She placed a scoop of grain into the feed bucket and filled the water trough. The metal groaned with the cold. Midnight didn't flinch, but his eyes never left her. "I'm not going to force anything," she said, backing out of the stall. "I just want to show you I'm not like them." He shifted slightly, one hoof scraping the floor. It wasn't aggression. More like uncertainty. But even that was progress. By late morning, she sat just outside the stall, a paperback open in her lap. She read aloud, soft, steady words that floated through the barn like sunlight through dust. Not for him to understand, but for him to hear her voice and learn it didn't bring harm. This became her routine. Days passed like this, frosty mornings, quiet readings, slow movement. She slept little, ate less, her entire world orbiting around this fragile bond she was trying to build with something untouchable. Her grandfather watched in silence most days, leaning on his cane from the porch. He didn't offer more warnings, but his eyes carried a sorrow that Lily couldn't bear to meet. The truth was, she hadn't just bought Midnight out of pity. She'd seen in him something raw and familiar, a storm that had nowhere left to go. A year had passed since her parents died in that crash. A slippery road, a deer in the headlights, a night too dark to see. One moment she had a family, the next a void. The foster homes had felt like cages, each one trying to force her into routines, into politeness, into forgetfulness. Her grandfather's place was the only one that hadn't tried to mold her. He simply let her exist, broken and angry and silent. When the letter came saying the state would soon place her somewhere else, she knew she had to act. Midnight was never about just the horse. She needed to show she could stay. That she had a purpose. That she wasn't another burden waiting to be relocated. So she watched the horse. She learned him. He hated sudden movements. Loud sounds made him shrink into himself, ears pinned flat. When she tried to clean his stall one afternoon, he nearly shattered the back gate with a terrified kick. But there were signs of something else too. When she sang, not words, just gentle melodies her mother used to hum, he calmed. Not fully, not like a tamed animal, but the tightness in his frame would loosen. His nostrils flared less. His head would drop slightly. Enough for her to believe there was something left inside him untouched by fear. Still, she didn't touch him. Not yet. Then came the fourth morning. She entered the barn carrying a faded red blanket, the same one she had used on her mother's old mare. Midnight saw it and froze. For a moment, Lily thought he might charge. But instead, he backed into the far corner of the stall, trembling. She dropped the blanket, careful and slow, near the door. "I won't use it. Just let it be near you." By that afternoon, the blanket was still there, and Midnight had taken 2 cautious steps toward it. That night, as she sat cross-legged outside the stall, her grandfather brought her a mug of tea and leaned against the post beside her. "I don't understand you," he said without judgment. Lily smiled faintly. "He's afraid. But not mean." "I've seen mean," the old man replied, his voice gravel and wind. "And I've seen scared. This one's both." She looked at the horse, who now lay curled in the straw for the first time. "Maybe. But so was I, once." The 5th day brought the wind. Sharp, biting gusts that rattled the barn and sent flecks of dust and hay swirling. Lily stayed through it, braving the chill, reinforcing Midnight's stall so nothing could startle him loose. But something shifted inside him that day. As the gusts howled, he walked to the front of the stall, closer to the gate than he'd ever dared, and just stood there, watching her, breathing deeply. She took a risk. Slowly, heart pounding, Lily reached into her coat and pulled out half an apple, sliced neatly. She held it on her open palm and waited. Midnight didn't move. She didn't waver. Minutes passed like lifetimes. Then he took a single, tentative step. Then another. His nostrils flared. The apple glistened. And he stopped, close enough to take it, but still unsure. Lily didn't press. She simply placed the apple gently on the ground between them, and stepped back. Midnight waited, then dipped his head and took it in one fluid, guarded motion. She let herself smile. By the 7th day, he was meeting her at the gate each morning. Still wary, still wild, but present. Engaged. That was the morning she decided to open the stall door. Her hands shook as she unlatched the gate. She didn't enter. She simply opened it and sat on her hay bale, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear herself think. Midnight stood still for a long time. Then he stepped out. One hoof. Then another. He didn't run. He didn't bolt. He just walked into the open barn aisle and stood there as if waiting for some invisible permission to exist freely. Her grandfather watched from the doorway, lips pressed into a tight line. "He's out," he said, not moving. "Yes," Lily replied. "And he chose it." She walked a few feet away and sat down. Midnight followed, careful and quiet. He didn't touch her. But when she held out her hand, palm up, he sniffed it. That night she didn't sleep. She stayed in the barn, wrapped in the red blanket, and Midnight rested nearby, close enough that she could hear the steady rhythm of his breath. It was the first time she felt less alone in months. But progress, like storms, never comes without warning. The following day brought a complication that would test everything she'd built. Midnight was grazing quietly in the paddock behind the barn, fenced but open to the wind and sky. Lily stood nearby, talking softly, brushing out a tangle of burrs from his tail for the first time without resistance. Then a shout. Loud. Angry. A truck pulled up at the end of the gravel road. Dust flew. A man in a sheriff's uniform stepped out, followed by a woman in a gray coat holding a clipboard. Her heart sank. She knew that look. She'd seen it before, at hospitals, at courtrooms, at foster homes. The woman gave a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lily Ray? We need to talk about your placement." Midnight's ears twitched. His body went tense. The silence that followed the sheriff's words felt heavier than any storm Lily had ever endured. Midnight stood like a statue, muscles taut beneath his dark coat, tail flicking in slow, measured movements. He wasn't just a horse anymore. In that frozen moment, he became a guardian, a barrier between Lily and a world she never asked to face alone. The social worker stepped back instinctively, her eyes flickering from the horse to Lily's unwavering expression. "He's dangerous," she said, her voice low but pointed. "You can't trust an animal like that." Lily didn't blink. "He trusts me." "That may be," the sheriff replied, voice more measured, "but trust doesn't change paperwork. Your guardianship is still under review. We can't ignore that." Midnight let out a snort, the sound sharp and deliberate. The sheriff took a cautious step back, raising his hands in a gesture of calm. "Nobody's here to hurt you or the horse. But we need to do things right." Lily's grandfather emerged from the barn door, cane in hand, his gaze focused not on the visitors but on his granddaughter. "She's been here every morning before dawn. Works harder than anyone I've known. If raising that horse proves anything, it's that she's already earned the right to stay." "She's 16, the woman said gently, flipping through her folder. "There are systems." "Your systems don't know her," the old man interrupted, voice firm but steady. "And they sure as hell don't know what that horse has done for her." Lily didn't flinch as Midnight stepped closer, pressing his massive head lightly against her shoulder. It wasn't affection as much as solidarity. An unspoken alliance forged through quiet battles neither of them would ever fully articulate. The sheriff took a deep breath. "We'll give it time. But you'll need to show progress. Proof this isn't just emotion. Emotion. As if the bond between them was anything less than survival itself." The social worker left her card and a timeline. A caseworker would return in 2 weeks. Until then, everything rested in a fragile balance. That night, Lily sat in the barn again, legs curled beneath her, watching Midnight chew through the last of his hay. The light from the hanging bulb cast long shadows across the walls. Her grandfather had gone inside hours earlier, trusting her to keep watch. She whispered into the stillness. "They want proof. What do I give them, huh?" Midnight flicked an ear but said nothing, as always. But she didn't need words. Not now. The next morning, the training began. Not with ropes or reins. Midnight would never accept those. She started with rhythm, routine, repetition. She stepped into the paddock at the same time every morning, carrying a bucket, her presence calm and grounded. She never approached directly, always giving him the choice to come. After 3 days, he began meeting her halfway. By the end of the week, he was waiting at the fence. She introduced a soft lead rope, draping it over her arm without ever reaching for him. Midnight eyed it warily but didn't bolt. She let it sit nearby during feeding, during grooming, during long, quiet moments where nothing was asked of him. Eventually, curiosity won. He sniffed it, let her drape it lightly across his withers. She never clipped it, never forced. Trust took root in the smallest details. But progress wasn't linear. On the 10th day, a thunderstorm cracked through the sky with no warning. Midnight panicked, rearing in the stall, slamming his hooves against the gate. Lily rushed to him without thinking, opening the stall and stepping inside. He could have crushed her. But he didn't. He paced, wild-eyed, muscles rippling beneath a sheen of sweat, but he never touched her. Her voice cut through the chaos, steady, low, and unwavering. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." Eventually, his breathing slowed. His head lowered. And for the first time, she reached up and touched his neck. Warm. Alive. Real. Her grandfather found them that way an hour later, Lily sitting against the wall of the stall, her hand resting against Midnight's flank as he stood beside her like a shadow. "I think he's yours now," he said quietly. But Lily knew better. She wasn't his owner. She was his equal. The next morning, she took a new step. She clipped the lead rope to his halter. Midnight tensed but didn't fight. Lily didn't pull, didn't lead. She simply walked and waited. He followed. 1 step, then 2. Around the paddock, along the fence, past the barn. By the end of the afternoon, he followed her without the rope. The social worker returned on day 14, clipboard in hand and doubt in her eyes. "I need to see him work," she said. "See you control him." Lily nodded and led them to the paddock. Midnight stood in the center, watching as she entered. The sun cast golden light across his coat, catching the faint scars near his ribs, ghosts of the past he'd never tell her. She didn't use the lead. She didn't need it. She whistled, 3 short notes, the same she'd practiced every day. Midnight's ears flicked forward. He walked to her, unhurried but certain. She raised a hand and pointed left. He turned. Right. He obeyed. She ran. He chased her in a wide arc, hooves thundering in a rhythm that echoed her heartbeat. She stopped. He stopped. The social worker stared, mouth parted, words caught behind the realization. Lily turned slowly and walked toward Midnight. He stepped forward to meet her, bowing his head slightly, as if offering her some silent vow of trust. "This horse isn't trained," the woman said, barely above a whisper. "No," Lily replied. "He's free." Later, the sheriff pulled her aside. "You just changed her mind," he said with a soft grin. But Lily didn't smile. She just turned back to Midnight. There was more to prove. With the assessment passed, Lily was allowed to stay on probation under her grandfather's care, the first step toward full emancipation. But what mattered more was the way Midnight had stood beside her when it counted. The days that followed turned into a rhythm of growth. The horse that once refused a glance now sought her out. He greeted her with soft nickers, allowed her to brush him without flinching, followed her across open fields as if tethered by something stronger than rope. She began teaching him voice commands, simple, soft-spoken instructions paired with hand gestures. He responded faster than she expected, as if eager to belong to something again. Then came the letter, an invitation from a local equestrian center, having heard through the sheriff about the wild Mustang the girl from nowhere had tamed. They wanted to offer a demonstration day, a chance to show the community the transformation. Lily's heart raced as she read it. This wasn't about performing. It was about proving to herself, and the world, that broken things didn't have to stay broken. She hesitated to accept. Midnight wasn't a show horse. He wasn't tamed in the traditional sense. But he was hers. And more importantly, she was his. She looked into his eyes that evening, watching the soft flick of his ears as she brushed his mane. "They want us to perform," she said. "But we don't need to prove anything. Not unless you want to." Midnight lowered his head and leaned gently into her chest. It was answer enough. She began preparing, not by teaching him tricks but by showing. The crowd remained still, breath caught in their lungs, as Lily and Midnight circled the ring in near silence. There was no music, no fancy choreography, just the soft sound of hooves against earth and the occasional rustle of wind through the rafters. But it was enough. More than enough. Because what they witnessed wasn't a performance. It was a relationship carved from pain and patience, from grit and grace, played out in each deliberate step they took together. Lily didn't speak, didn't wave to the crowd. Her focus was entirely on Midnight. She moved with purpose, and he mirrored her. When she slowed, so did he. When she turned, he pivoted with her, eyes fixed, ears attuned to her every breath. Their connection was palpable, so strong, it seemed to transcend the arena. It wasn't the precision that held the crowd, it was the emotion. The invisible tether between horse and girl that vibrated with every shared heartbeat. At one point, she paused and raised her hand gently. Midnight stopped on cue, his posture relaxed, confident, willing. A murmur of awe rippled through the audience. She took a few steps backward, further away than she'd ever dared in public. Midnight's gaze followed her, hesitant at first, then resolute. With a soft whistle, she beckoned him, and he came. It was a simple moment. But in it, Lily could feel the culmination of everything: the late nights in the barn, the storms weathered together, the sting of judgment and the thrill of quiet victories. She didn't need applause. The fact that he came to her when called, despite all he'd been through, was the only reward she ever wanted. When it was over, there was a beat of silence. Then, thunderous applause. Lily blinked, almost startled. Midnight's ears twitched, uncertain, but she reached up and steadied him with a touch. The cheers rolled over them like a wave, but she didn't bask in it. She turned to Midnight and whispered, "Let's go home." The announcer tried to call her back, to offer another round, but Lily was already leading him from the ring. She hadn't come to win anything. She had come to be seen, for who she really was, and for who Midnight had become. In the stables behind the arena, a man approached. He was tall, weathered, with boots that had seen decades of dust and a hat pulled low over his brow. His name tag read Coach Brad Holloway, State Equestrian League. "You taught him that yourself?" he asked, nodding toward Midnight, who was busy munching hay, completely unconcerned with his sudden fame. Lily hesitated. "We taught each other." The man chuckled softly. "I've seen a lot of horse work in my time. That wasn't training. That was trust. Rare as diamonds." Lily shrugged. Compliments had never settled easy with her. "He doesn't let just anyone near." "I can tell," Brad said, stepping back a respectful distance. "I won't waste your time. I coach for the state youth equestrian team. We've got a showcase tour next season, non-competitive but high visibility. We need someone who can do what you just did, and better. And not with a flashy horse. With a real story. With heart." Lily's heart thudded. "You're offering me a spot?" she asked, barely believing it. "I'm offering you a platform," he replied. "And maybe a future." She looked over at Midnight, who paused in chewing to glance her way, his eyes gentle but steady. He seemed to already know her answer. "I'll do it," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Lily balanced her responsibilities at the ranch with preparing for the tour. Her grandfather, though aging and sometimes stiff in his joints, rallied in support. He repaired the old trailer they'd use for travel and even taught her the finer points of towing. Midnight, too, sensed the shift. He trained harder, listened closer, as if understanding that their journey was just beginning. Word began to spread beyond their county. Local news outlets picked up the story. Untamable horse becomes star thanks to teenage girl, and interest exploded. They were invited to speak at equestrian clubs, schools, even at a horse rescue fundraiser. But Lily never let the spotlight distract her. Fame wasn't her goal. Healing was. During one of their early showcases, held in a modest fairground arena, a boy no older than 12 approached her after the performance. He had tears in his eyes and a photo in his hand. "This was my sister's horse," he said, pointing to a grainy print of a black Mustang, unmistakably Midnight. "She died 2 years ago. My parents sold him after everything." Lily knelt beside him, her heart clenching. "I think he remembers her," the boy said. "He used to follow her everywhere." Lily reached for the boy's hand and held it gently. "He never forgot," she said. "He just needed someone to remind him how to trust again." The boy nodded and smiled bittersweet. Then he stepped forward and hugged Midnight's leg. The horse didn't flinch. That moment stayed with Lily long after the lights dimmed. The tour grew. So did their bond. By the end of the season, Lily and Midnight had performed in 7 states. They never used props or music. Just space, silence, and their connection. And every time, the audience felt something deeper than applause could express. Then came the invitation from the National Mustang Preservation Society. They were hosting their annual gala, an elite event in Nevada, and wanted Lily and Midnight to close the night. In the